I thought I was going to have to spend the rest of my life with 1,200 calorie diets. On high fat carnivore, I was eating 2,000. I was eating 1,900, 2,000.
Why do you think you're losing weight on such high calories?
I think it's because these last few months, I have been working on other things. This whole calories in, calories out, that is not true. Not true.
If you struggle to lose weight and you're at your wit's end, perhaps a high fat carnivore diet might be right for you. Today, I interviewed Anita, Ketogenic Woman, and she has lost over 130 pounds, partly due to a high fat carnivore diet. Anita will share everything, including her best weight loss tips, her mistakes that she has made so that you can get faster weight loss results. Now, if all this is a little bit too confusing and you need a little guidance, I have created the ultimate 4-week fat loss course to teach you how to lose weight on a high-fat carnivore diet. You'll learn how to optimize your protein, your fat, and how to build the perfect carnivore meal. There is a link in the description below this video with 20% off just for you. Anita, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, you have lost over 100 pounds, over 130 pounds. But I wanted to know,
Yes.
was it from a high-fat carnivore diet?
No, it was from cutting carbs, then evolving into keto, and then ketovore, and then carnivore. And now I am in high fat carnivore mode.
Okay, because we hear a lot about 80-20 high-fat carnivore and that being great to heal and lose a lot of weight. So do you think that is the most effective or quite effective for people that want to lose fat?
I do, but I guess my hesitation in answering that is that there's a healing component which you touched on there. And for me, I eventually got to the point in my weight loss where all the regular things weren't working. Just eating all the meat I wanted was no longer working. Counting macros didn't work. I mean, all those usual things they tell you to do, cut out everything, except meat and water. That didn't work either. And then I started hearing about high fat carnivore. And I implemented it very strictly, like counting macros, taking my measurements. I did that for 90 days. Now, the results that I got for 90 days, most people would call a failure because I stayed exactly the same weight for those 90 days. But a lot of things happened. A lot of things happened uh, behind the scenes that you can't measure on the bathroom scale. And then when after I did those 90 days, all of a sudden I started losing weight. I lost 5 pounds the next month. I lost 2 pounds last month. So I'm back into a weight loss mode now. I honestly think that I needed to do some healing your body gets to a point where it's like, oh, this is as far as we can take you until you fix a few things. And I think that's where I was.
I think that's what we see a lot in terms of weight loss is not just about macros, protein, fat,
No.
exercising. It's a lot of to do with your hormones, decades of damaging your
Yes.
hormones from
Yes.
dieting. I know that you've done a lot of diets. You've done every diet. I've done
Oh,
every diet.
you name it. I know about it. I mean, I've done it. And most of them were very, the old school type thinking, the calories. I actually, during that 90 days of high fat carnivore, I proved to myself that I can do high calorie and not gain weight. And that was a super bonus that I wasn't expecting. I thought I was going to have to spend the rest of my life with 1,200 calorie diets. Even on carnivore, I heard people going, oh no, you have to cut your calories if you're eating too many calories. I started to hear that and I'm like, that's really disappointing. And I heard Judy Cho talk about that the calories that many women my age are eating are for an 11 or 12-year-old child, not for a woman. I'm 65, and to live on 1,200 calories, I don't think is very healthy. On high fat carnivore, I was eating 2,000. I was eating 1,900, 2,000, up to 2,200. I didn't really go further because that's my satiety level. But in that range, I did that for 90 days and did not gain an ounce. And I thought that was mind blowing. And it just made me think, yes, okay, this whole calories in, calories out, that is not true. Not true.
So I think a lot of people are going to be thinking about, do calories matter? Do calories not matter? In your opinion, in a high fat carnivore or even a carnivore diet, why do you think calories don't matter and that we don't need to count them or think about them?
Well, I don't know if I would go so far as to say they don't matter, because clearly if you eat 5,000 calories a day, one could gain. I'm sure I would gain weight on some super high calorie, and then obviously less than 1,200 calories a day, I think does matter. I don't think we're getting the proper nutrition with that. And I never lost weight on a 1,200 calorie diet. So to me, it seemed like it matters in some sense, but it's not going to determine your results. That, I think, that's the important point, that the number of calories alone is not going to determine your long-term results, especially, and the sustainability of whatever program you're following. And so when I started doing the high-fat carnivore, I went into one of those TDEE calculators, total daily energy expenditure, and it was telling me that I should be eating around 1,900. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't think that would work with that. Like, I was scared. I really was. I thought that was too high, and it wasn't.
You
So
said that you didn't lose weight on 1,200 calories. Why do you think you're losing weight on such high calories? 2,000 calories a day.
I think it's because during my, these last few months, I have been working on other things. I've been working on my sleep. I've been working on my circadian rhythm. And those two things I think are really important. I've been thinking more about health than weight loss, because I kept hearing from people like Dr. Elizabeth Bright, Kelly Hogan. I mean, these are people that I've seen show up on your channel too. So I think you know the type of messages that they are giving is that there needs to be some healing of these other systems in your body. And Dr. Boz as well. It was from her that I heard about people who have been insulin resistant. They need to get into just a slightly different mode. She does it with sardines and all kinds of things
I've
like
seen
that.
your challenge.
Yeah. And though when you start working on those things, getting more omega-3s, getting a better sleep, getting out, get some sunshine, start moving. I joined a fitness class, which I'm going to after this, and so that's resistance training. You start to do those other things for your body, and your body eventually says, oh, okay, maybe I'm going to let you lose a little bit more weight here, and the scale is going to start moving because you're doing some of these other things to make it easier to do that. I'm not a doctor, but I'm experienced with dieting, and too much experience with dieting, and I really feel like my body, everything feels different. It feels like going through that high fat carnivore made me realize I was not eating enough fat. My hormones, I believe I'm postmenopausal, obviously at 65. They needed to have some healing, and I believe that is what is happening. And so I'm really grateful that I heard about doing high fat because it is helping me a lot.
I'm glad that you spoke about hormones because a lot of it is to do with our damaged hormones, like insulin. I recently learned about
Mm-hmm.
leptin resistance as well. Like when you never feel full, there's some people that are on carnivore that can just eat a lot of calories. Dr. Chafee spoke about that last week when I interviewed him about the top mistakes that people are making when they're doing a
Mm-hmm.
carnivore diet. And there's, different things that we need to work on, especially when we're trying to lose weight. And he also says that optimize your hormones first, heal. Body composition comes next. He even says, don't even think about fat loss. Don't even think about fat loss because that is going to come later on. And by the way, that's going to come up on my YouTube channel tomorrow. So I'll leave the link down below. Don't even think about fat loss. Think about your health, your healing your hormones,
Yeah.
healing the inflammation, body composition, because I know that you're working out as well.
Yeah.
Everything else is just going to fall into place because you lost 5 pounds, then 2 pounds, which is a
Yeah.
major win.
It is when you haven't really lost much of anything in months and you're starting to think, oh, this maybe isn't working anymore for me. I would encourage anyone to try upping their fat a little bit. They don't have to go to a fat fast right away. I try to do those once in a while. And I saw that you have done them too. So,
I've done
you know how
one.
good you feel. You've done one?
Well, can I just tell you that I made a mistake? So I felt great. I dropped, and a lot of people said it was water weight. Probably it was water weight. I don't have much weight. I don't have any weight to lose. But I made the mistake of overeating butter bites.
Yeah.
And honestly,
Yeah.
I vomited on day 3.
I think I remember that in that
And
video.
then I just stopped after that because I just thought
Yeah.
I felt so sick. And then I looked at your video to see what other fat sources that we can have, like suet, we can have like all these different things.
Yeah.
So I just thought I really need to invest in other fat sources rather than just butter bites and butter.
I think so too. I mean, yeah, and I think like I can do maybe 1 tablespoon of fat in a hot liquid, like in a coffee, but any more than that, and I'm running to the bathroom. And there was even some news story about Starbucks putting olive oil into their coffees, and all their customers are having to run to the bathroom. So
Really?
it kind of yes, I saw that on the news yesterday. So it kind of makes sense. And too much butter, I don't think it's all about eating butter. I like that you looked at the other fats too, because I think animal fat, well, I mean, butter, I guess, is technically animal fat, but things like tallow bites, I started making those as well as butter bites, and I like them, and I think I do better on them. Also, you said 3 days. I I can only do 1 day of a fat fast, and then I'm like, no, I can't. I need a steak. I need a hamburger or something. I need meat. And some people can do 3 days, but I don't seem to be one of them. So I try to just throw in a day here and there, and it does amazing things for my ketones. I mean, the next morning they're up there. So yeah, it's real. I enjoy doing it, but 1 day at a time.
I hope you're enjoying this interview with Anita, Ketogenic Woman. If you love the interview or any of my videos and got some value out of it, can I ask for a favor? Can you go down the bottom of this video and hit that like button? That's going to help YouTube recommend it to more people to find the carnivore diet and to achieve optimal health. Well, I just did 3 days just to try 3 days, but you know what?
Yeah.
I'd be good at just 1 day. I think it's really good just to reset your appetite. Again, boost your
Yes.
ketones. I didn't actually test my ketones then. I did test it recently and it was 3.4. And that was my first time testing ever. So then I'm thinking 3.4, is that good? Like is that like okay? And then I'm looking at the numbers. I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. But I don't test ketones. I don't test I recently tested my glucose and it was 74. I know that you love to test. Like, I've seen
I
your, like, spreadsheets and everything.
Yes, I know, and I never used to test. So I just wanna say that if people think they have to test to be successful doing carnivore, that's not true for everybody. I never had a monitor, one of those dual glucose, like a Keto Mojo. I never had one until I had already lost most of my weight. It's now that I'm tweaking and trying to take this the rest of the way, really hoping that I get closer to my goal weight this year. And so the testing made me realize that I was not in ketosis. I had no idea that. I don't even know if I ever was, but what I was doing was enough to get me most of the way. So I decided to get the testing meter when I tried the high fat carnivore because people were saying, it'll raise your ketones, it'll lower your blood glucose. So the first day I tested was just after a straight carnivore day, just eating the meat I felt like eating, no macros, no anything. And I was kind of surprised that my blood glucose was higher than I thought it would be, and my ketones were like zero point 0.1, like nothing. Like that's not even in ketosis. That's just regular people.
Do you think that it's important to be in ketosis if your goal is fat loss and healing?
For some people, yes. And those people would be people like me that are older and have had a lifetime of obesity because you don't spend the bulk of your life, and for me, it was up until my 50s, being, say, over 300 pounds or even 200, very obese, like classified as obese. When you spend that many years in that metabolic state, there's things that are not right, and we may not know what they are. My doctor was not one to do many lab tests and never said to me your A1C needs to come down or anything like that. I mean, these are things that I figured out from watching YouTube videos, from watching, Dr. Barry and people like that. That's where I got my information that these are the things I need to heal. And so testing was good for that, and doing my spreadsheets and finding out that, wow, so from going completely not in ketosis, by the end of that 3 months of doing, the tracking of I still do high fat carnivore. I'm just not tracking it right now, but I'm no like now I know now that I tracked strictly for 3 months, both on those meters and on chronometer. Now I know what to eat without tracking. So it's not a forever thing that you have to track. But now I know. I randomly just pick up my Keto Mojo. I actually have Foracare as well because it's easier to get strips in Canada. So I pick up one of those randomly and take my morning numbers. I'm always in ketosis now, always.
Yay! Well
Yes. And
done.
yes, and I feel, and my Dr. Boz ratio, if anyone uses that, or GKI, whatever measurement you want to use, it's always in that moderate ketosis. And I think that for women like me, I think we do need that for some healing if we have healing to do. There's people who are young and fit and don't need to worry about those things, and just doing regular carnivore will work excellent for them, for the most part, I think.
And that's why I wanted to interview you because you are doing the high fat carnivore. You have seen the results. And, for people to understand, is it right for them? Because I get a lot of comments on the YouTube, on elsewhere on Instagram asking, oh, how much fat? I'm putting on weight or
Mhm.
this or that. Like
Yeah,
they're just curious. They don't know how to do it because a lot of people, when they come to carnivore, they just think, okay, eat meat. Well, what type of meat? How much fat should it be?
yeah,
How much protein?
yeah.
So there's all these little questions that you just have to kind of trial and error. Is that what you would think as well?
Yes, I did a lot of trial and error. And it's when I got to the high fat carnivore space, that's what I wanted to do. I had done so many trials and errors at that point with carnivore, and just didn't seem to feel like things were moving me along. I mean, it was I'd lose a pound and then I'd gain a pound. It was just sort of a lot of back and forth. I wasn't doing bad because I've been maintaining over 130-pound weight loss for quite some time. So I wouldn't call that, a failure, but I also still have weight on my body that needs to come off one way or another. And so I want to do it in a healthy way. And I feel like doing these other things, to fix my sleep and my hormones and all those things, I believe that's moving me down the road to maintaining a healthy environment so that the fat can feel comfortable being released. That's kind of how I'm hearing what the other people are saying, like the doctors, like Dr. Bright, those types of people. I know you've had a few more. I saw your last video where you not last video, but it's just recently where you had 4 or 5 people that were giving
Carnivore
their
diet for
their
women.
yeah, yes, that's the one. I loved that video. I shared it in my group with my followers, and they all thought it was excellent. And so I want to thank you for bringing people like that on to talk about women's issues, especially. And because we are a little different. And then as we get older, things were so much easier before menopause, let me tell you. The
Oh,
weight came off. The
and
weight
when you're
came off.
younger. I think that
Yes,
so I'm
yes,
40 now. So any age that you are, you always have your challenges. Something was easier at this
yes,
decade, at this decade, at
yes.
this. I'm sure that when I'm 50, I would say, oh, this was easier at 40. Oh,
Yeah,
this was easier.
yeah,
Like, so it gets,
yeah.
you have to work at it. You have to always
Yes.
tweak. Things change. You keep doing the same thing, you can't get the same results. Your body's always changing.
And just here's a little piece of hope for people who are pre-menopause and know that they will have to go through menopause. Um, so I started low carb and keto before menopause, and I went through menopause as a person doing very low carbs. I was pretty much ketovore by that point. The only symptom, I have one symptom of menopause, and that is that my cycle stopped. Like I've had no other symptoms. I don't know if that is because of the way I've been eating, but I have to think that it plays a big part. I mean, there's
Massive.
been nothing. It's like I wouldn't know I was in menopause if my cycle hadn't stopped.
That's the
That's it.
power of high fat. And
Yeah.
exactly that is what Dr. Bright talks about. Menopause doesn't have to be a stage where anything happens. It's just like, oops, my period stopped. I'm in
Yeah.
menopause. And it's exactly what you went through when you're feeding yourself with the prime energy that it needs, which is fat.
Yes, I agree with her 100%. I've read her book and I was like, yes, 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 all the way through it that, this somehow we expect all these things to happen and we're going to be on medications to treat menopause, which is not a disease. It's just a state we go through, a natural state, like puberty. Do we treat puberty with medications? And that's a hormonal state that humans go through just like menopause. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case there's any people who are approaching that period of their life, that it's not a big scary thing when you're feeding yourself the proper human diet.
And when you're consistent, as you are as well,
Yes.
because that's another thing where they say, oh, I've been doing this for 30 days or 60 days or whatever the
Yeah,
case is, and I'm not getting the results.
yeah.
What would you say to people like that?
It's not long enough. I would say that 60 days, 90 days, you've just gone through probably the worst of it. It's too soon to give up because the good stuff is still coming and it takes time for your body to heal. I mean, I feel like carnivore, it's a healing protocol, and high fat carnivore especially is a healing protocol. And if you're thinking you're going to drop all the weight overnight that maybe have taken you years to put on, it that may be a disappointment to you then. But if you're looking for that healthy balance, that road to your body healing, especially as we age as women, I think it's a really good way to go. And I would encourage you to just hang in there, like just keep going, embrace the meat, make lots of meat recipes. One of the goals for my channel was to make carnivore more accessible to everyday people like me and older women like me who have had a lifetime of cooking for their families, and maybe they're taking care of their aging parents now as well. I went through that as well. And it's hard to just go from all that training that we did as the caregivers givers of our family to just facing maybe, people come to me and say, I don't think I can just eat a steak for the rest of my life. I need these things. And so use it as a gateway to get in. Now I eat very simple. I mean, I do a lot of recipes, but I eat very simply on a day-to-day basis. The recipes are for those people that still need that variety. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, to be honest.
I also
Yes.
watched another video that you did, which is talking about carnivore is restrictive. Is
Yes.
it restrictive? You
I
did a
get that a lot.
you did a wonderful job of answering
Thank
that
you.
question and putting it into perspective. So can you talk about that for people watching thinking meat is restrictive? How can I do
Yeah.
this? What is restriction to you?
To me, it's a way of life. So I don't find carnivore restrictive at all because I do like to cook a variety of meats. And I mean, I after Easter I ate prime rib for 3 days because our Easter dinner was canceled. There was, the C virus went through part of my family. We canceled Easter dinner, so I was eating prime rib for days, never got tired of it. But I understand that some people will look at that because they're eating regular whatever, day in and day out, or maybe not. But in my mind, I have such freedom. I am free from those, obsessing about food, thinking about food, cooking 3 wonderful gourmet meals 3 times a day in and day out. That's, time freedom as well. And being uh, the weight that I was, where I had to constantly check myself and I had to constantly, oh, who's going to be there? What are they going to think of me? All that mental obsession that goes on is very restrictive. And the people who watch that video where I talked about, I don't have to worry about breaking chairs. I don't have to worry about fitting in an airplane seat. I can take my grandkids on the roller coaster. I can do all the normal things that I couldn't do in my younger years because I was so obese. And people that were watching that video, they left me other things that, yes, what about being on dialysis? That's restrictive. What about being, walking with a cane when you're only 35 or 40 years old? That's a little restrictive. I mean, there are so many things about weight. And even if it's not a lot of weight, in your mind, it can be so restrictive. I can't go out. I'm 20 pounds overweight. I can't go to the beach. I can't go on a beach holiday because I feel so ugly in what I'm wearing. All those things, mental and physical, are so restrictive. But when you're just eating meat and fat, it is, once that settles in, once you get through that adaptation period, it is the greatest freedom of all. I mean, it is. I just believe that 110%.
So once you pass this adaptation process, which you've clearly have, what, if you could go back, what are the mistakes that you have made that you could tell others so that they don't do the same thing?
uh, okay, well, some of these could be embarrassing. Eating too much fat too soon, in like too early. Like, don't go from regular eating to high fat carnivore all the way, like 80-90% on day one or week one. Um, so that I feel that you need to ease into that. Um, because your tummy is going to have some gurgly issues. Listen to your tummy. Don't leave the house if you're feeling a little bit like, I call it disaster pants.
Oh my God, no, it's massive.
And
I went through that process going
okay.
from carnivore to high fat carnivore. I kind of did it overnight. I was carnivore for like 2 years, like strict carnivore. And then I went high fat carnivore. After talking to Dr. Bright, I was just like, no, I'm going to try it. Over 80%. So 80% lean, no, 80% fat, 20% lean.
Yes.
And then,
You did
yeah,
that overnight?
disaster pants. But
Yes.
then like I was just like, that's fine. And I just had a lot of butter at that time as well. And it's
Yeah.
only recently that I kind of cut back on the butter, trying to have the fat incorporated in the meat,
Yes.
fatty meat, as opposed to adding the butter, because I think I was getting an addiction to butter.
I think, and that is actually a good example of a mistake, is to just think that just add butter, whatever you're eating, just add a stick of butter. I actually, I even have it here. When I first started doing the high fat carnivore, I made myself a list of meats, and I just made a list and I wrote down their fat percentage, because I didn't know which ones were the fattiest. I mean, sometimes your eyes can deceive you. A ribeye is about 70%. I think everybody agrees on that. Short ribs are closer to 80% fat already. So you can eat short ribs and you don't have to really add butter to those. Pork belly is close to 80%. So, I mean, there's things you can do. You don't necessarily have to track. You can just make a list of the highest fat meats, like brisket, picanha, lamb chops, like all of those things don't need a lot of fat added. Some of them just maybe a tablespoon of butter, or extra beef fat trimmings at the next meal. That's another favorite thing of mine. Yeah, you don't. You can make it easier on yourself. I kind of wish that I had known that my body could tolerate more calories, so I wasn't always fighting that 12 to 1500. I have to fit this in and that in. I wish that I had known that um, that my body can actually function quite well on the amount of protein I'm eating, but I didn't know how important the fat was to making everything else a little easier and a little better, and improving the other markers like my sleep scores, those sorts of things. I wish I had known about bedtime butter. I learned about that from Dr. Bright. That was a game changer for me, and and I wish that I had known that, if I do some intermittent fasting. I'm finding that I'm most comfortable with 2 meals a day. But if I'm, in the evening, I think it's okay if I have a tablespoon of butter before I go to bed, because I've tested, it does not affect my numbers, and I get a better sleep. I used to wake up like clockwork, 2:30, and I'd be wide awake and couldn't go back to sleep, and I always assumed it was because I had to use the bathroom, and then I would have trouble falling back asleep. Well, I sleep right through that now. I mean, I'm up early because I'm an early bird, so I'm usually up between 4:30 and 5, get a lot done in the early morning. But I never wake up now to go to the bathroom, and I don't drink any less water than I did before. I mean, everything is the same.
It's interesting. I heard that 2:30 a.m. wake up is your cortisol.
Yes, I
Yeah,
heard
and
that
then
too from Dr. Bright.
me too.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for Dr. Bright. And then the
Oh,
bed
yes, love her.
Oh, and then the bedtime butter, it's just, I do the same thing. I just get slithers of butter and it just is very calming and soothing. And I think it's from decades of restrictive eating, just having something in your mouth that doesn't increase insulin, it just makes you feel all warm and cozy inside. And I just feel I can go to bed.
Yeah, there's something. It's like maybe when our parents, I don't know if your parents did it, if we were feeling like we couldn't go to sleep, they would offer up a warm glass of milk, which always grossed me out, by the way. I don't like
Really?
the idea. Yeah, I didn't like the idea of a warm glass of milk. I like it cold, but that's just me. I can be a little strange that way. Um, but the butter, I wanted to also mention that I have heard some people tell me that if they're feeling anxious, there's something going on, that just taking just a little, even it doesn't have to be a lot, just even a little sliver or a teaspoon or something, and just letting it melt in your mouth, it has a calming effect. And so I have to do that every now and then, and it doesn't take much, but it just like, okay, I can do this now. I can get through this.
And even another
Yeah.
thing was, I was going to say, do you have a fatty latte in the morning?
I do, but I only have 1 tablespoon because liquid fat, even butter, if I have 2 tablespoons, it sends me to the bathroom. 1 tablespoon is just the right amount for me. And I have to say, I saw you in one of your videos. You have the same little whipper, like
Whizzer.
the little
Yeah.
whizzer thing that goes into the cup of coffee. And I laughed my head off. It went everywhere, and I just
Yeah.
loved that you didn't take that out of the video, like, because I could see it was going on your counter and stuff like that,
Well,
coffee and butter were going everywhere, and you just kept going, and I thought,
yeah.
yeah, she's my people.
Well, I just find that when I cook and I film, I'm very clumsy because I tend to be quite nervous when I have to film for some reason. I feel I have to be all proper, but if you know my real personality, I'm just very like fun and easygoing. And I just feel on camera, you have to be like, oh, this is how you do it and proper cooking show.
I
I'm like,
know.
I don't have a proper cooking show. I can't even cook. I just put my stuff in the air fryer and copy other people like you. I look at your recipes and say, oh, that looks good. I'm going to try it. Fail, but it looks good. So, what would be the best advice that you could give somebody wanting to get your results that you have had with a high fat carnivore diet? What's the one thing that you would tell them to get started with?
Oh boy. Well, I would say start slow. Well, first of all, I would say, back up just a moment. If what you're doing is working really well for you, there may not be a need to try the high fat. But if you're a woman who is approaching menopause, after menopause, you've got some, I think it's worth a try, but start slow, because I get a lot of people say, "Oh, I tried it and I gained weight." But I think maybe it's too much too soon, and maybe they're not adjusting the other macros to take up this extra fat they're eating. And so knowing what your TDEE is not carved in stone. But it's a good guide, and track for a couple of weeks just to see where you're landing, because your answer might be in what you've tracked, and you can use that information. I always thought, okay, I'm going to track it for this period of time, and if things go really wrong, at least I have the data. I can show somebody, a carnivore coach. There's lots of them out there, and I can show them, okay, here's what I ate, here's what my numbers look like, here's the amount of movement I have. What do you think? You have something to show, rather than, oh, I tried it and I gained weight, and that's all the information you get. That's all the information you have. So I am a bit nerdy with data, so take what I'm saying with with a grain of salt, because I know that tracking isn't for everybody. And some people came to carnivore because they didn't want to track. And I completely understand that. But if you're struggling, then I would definitely say try high fat carnivore, but keep track of what you're doing.
One thing that was very important that you said, when you increase your fat, you also have to decrease something else. What is that
Yeah.
something else?
Well, clearly the carbs are zero or close to zero. So it's protein. And a lot of people get alarmed when you say that. But when you look at what people are actually eating in terms of grams of protein, um, they're probably not that far off. I mean, I've seen some of the recommendations for this is how much women should eat, for their ideal body weight. So, and here's another thing that throws people off. They tend to make that calculation of protein based on their goal weight, not their ideal body weight. And those two can be quite different. That can be a 20 or 30-pound difference. For example, my ideal body weight is 123 pounds, according to the charts. I don't, Rena, I think even when I was a teenager, I never weighed 123 pounds. I passed that, when I was 10, maybe. And so my goal weight is quite different from that. And if I based my protein grams on my goal weight, they would be too high, I think, to do high fat carnivore successfully. So I lowered mine to be what a 123-pound woman should be eating. And so I feel it's adequate protein, it's sufficient protein and high fat. It's not low protein and high fat. I mean, we're doing that calculation based on data. So I feel pretty comfortable with it. And I landed in around 75 grams a day of protein at a minimum, but I go up to 90-ish without any problems. So that is where I learned that I could start upping those calories and not gain any weight. So
I did the same thing. It's when you have that, and I know for some people, 75 to 90 grams of protein might think, wow, that is so low. But it's not low. It's
no, it's
it's not
enough.
low. It's enough for what your body needs, for your activity
Mm.
level, especially if you're not an athlete.
Yes,
I'm not an athlete. By far, I'm not an
me neither.
athlete. I
Me
have to
neither.
push myself. Like my exercise is just walking, listening to
Mhm.
you, listening to other carnivores, and just going on the treadmill and walking. So we're not athletes. So, but there is
No.
a requirement for protein for your muscles, for your cells, for everything in your
Yes.
body, but it's much lower than what we've been told. And there's no, I listen like you. I'm not a doctor. I listen to the doctors, and what they say, I'm comfortable with. And people have to
Yeah.
find what is comfortable for them. Like Kelly Hogan on the Carnivore Diet for Women video said, based on Amber O'Hearn, she said
Hmm.
1.2 grams of protein per kilo of ideal body weight for women.
Yes. Yes.
And
And that is how I did my calculation.
yeah. And then Dr. Bright says she doesn't like to give numbers or track that much, but it works out quite similar. So it's very important. And when you equate that to what the food looks like on the plate, isn't that tiny? Like I always look at my meat and I think, oh, I'm going to be hungry. I'm definitely going to be hungry, but I'm not.
No, I know. I found that phenomena too. Like it was, a 4-ounce burger can look small, or a 6-ounce burger can look small. But once you have that with the fat, you don't want any more. I mean, it's very satisfying.
So are you changing anything or tweaking anything to increase your results this year?
Yes. So I have been adding omega-3s big time. So yeah, so what I learned from Kelly Hogan is to get more omega-3s. And So that's what led me to trying the sardine challenge. But I don't think everyone has to do 3 days of sardines, because I find that if I add a can of sardines to my evening meal, my numbers the next morning are fantastic. I've got excellent ketones. They're always higher on those mornings. And I don't have any at this point. I don't have any blood glucose issues. Mine are usually in the 80s, around there, 4.5, 4.7. So I think that's okay.
Perfect.
So yeah, adding in those omega threes is something I'm doing. So, and the other thing that was new to me was a formal fitness class. Like I walk too. I walk every day, but I also learned that, I need a little bit of muscle for my body as a postmenopausal woman, that having that muscle is going to help so many other systems in my body. And the other thing that I'm wanting to learn more about this year, and I am, on that path, and hope to meet the KetoCon people that know about this, is about the circadian rhythm. I get outside when the sun is rising, look towards the sun, try to get a little more sunshine during the day. And I do that through walking outside. And the evening is more of an issue for me. I have to figure out what to do in the evenings. Those sorts of things I think will all help. And so oh, and you had mentioned leptin resistance in the beginning when we were talking, and that is something that I've heard, but I don't really know what it is yet, and it's on my list of things to look into. So some of these things may not seem like a big deal, but adding those omega 3s, I feel has kind of changed the game for me a little bit.
Well,
I really feel there's healing.
as I said, I'm going to try the sardine challenge to see what happens to me because I'm curious as well. I've never tried sardines before, so I'm very curious to
Oh,
see. Yeah, I've tried anchovies.
oh, okay. They're way less salty than anchovies.
Okay, I had
Um,
anchovies with beef tartare, so and that
okay.
was
Oh,
divine
when you were
because
in
it's
Venice. Yeah,
yeah.
I
Um,
saw that.
and that was really hard to stay carnivore, by the way.
I bet.
I had some tiramisu, but I had the cream portion. Yes, I'm gonna try the when I'm back from KetoCon, I want to try the sardines. I'm just curious how I'm gonna feel because all I've been doing is eating triple beanie. I feel really good eating the triple beanie for some reason. And I watched, I'm sure that you did as well, Dr. Boz's video about sardines. Uh,
Yes.
Very fascinating too, and it's a carnivore superfood.
It is, and I also like triple B and E, and do it quite often, just to make sure I'm on the right track. But I don't know if I'd ever do a long triple B and E without my sardines. I have grown
Oh,
very attached to them.
really? Okay,
So I'm
okay.
calling it triple B and ES. I I just I just think I could do triple B and E forever, because it's just the basics and it's easy. But I don't know if I want to add those sardines in, maybe every couple of nights or something. I just really think they help.
Well, Anita, thank you so much for being on my channel, and I'm going to see you next week at KetoCon.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm very excited to meet you there as well. We'll see you next week.
I hope you enjoyed the interview with Anita, Ketogenic Woman. Why don't you watch these videos next on a high fat carnivore diet? See you next time.